Welcome back to the Effort Over Everything podcast. I'm your host, Jason Khalipa. And on today's episode, I have the pleasure of sitting down with one of my favorite guests, multiple time guest, Chris Hinshaw, to talk about learning how to swim. Now, here's the way this conversation got brought up. I text Chris, I'm like, hey man, I could use some help on some swim workouts. I want to introduce a few of the athletes that I work with for jiu-jitsu to swimming. What advice do you have? And before you start talking, I was like, no, hang on. Let's get on the podcast. Let's share this because he has such a wealth of knowledge. Now, if you don't know who Chris Hinshaw is, he is a world-renowned coach. He teaches seminars all over the world, has worked with the highest level athletes to everyday people going to the gym. He also competed professionally as a triathlete for years, and he helped me a ton along my CrossFit journey. I always love talking to Chris. He has tons of value. Today, we talk about breathing mechanics, swimming with fins, swimming with, hand things. We talk about what distances to incorporate, basically from start to finish, how to start doing your swim workouts. We also, towards the end of the episode, and this is something I was particularly intrigued on, start telling us this idea of critical swim speed, and then which form of cardio gives you the best bang for your buck, run, bike, or swim. So stay tuned in the episode to see what Chris says. Now, before we get into the episode, simple ask. Whether you're on Instagram, Facebook, you name it, tag us, hit us up, let us know, Chris and I, what you thought about the episode. And also, whether you're listening to us on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, would really appreciate a rating, a review. Takes you a short amount of time, but really, really means a lot to the podcast, means a lot to me. Would love to hear your feedback. So if you can, leave us a rating, leave us a review, and hit us up on social media. Let us know what you thought about this episode and perhaps other episodes. Now, without any further ado, let's dive into a great episode, Chris Hinshaw, on learning how to swim and all things swim workout related. Let's get it. First time I'd ever seen that before. All right, Mr. Chris Hinshaw. I'm gonna butcher this. The sanctionals just finished up, right?
You're so updated.
I'm gonna butcher this.
They're not called sanctionals, but okay, go on.
Well, the
semifinals.
Semifinals just finished up for the CrossFit Games, and yes. I wanted to ask you a question because I have to ask. I saw what Scott Panchik wrote about the ropes, boy. And it's really interesting because. So today's topic, by the way, this podcast is about swimming workouts and how to design them, and I'm really excited to talk about that. But I was curious what your thoughts were about how the semifinal events went and if you had any visibility and all that, and then what they could do about these ropes in the future, because it seems like it's a just kind of a well-known thing that
Dude, you're surprised. You're popping this on me. How'd you know that I have an opinion about this?
Well, so for those of you who don't have context on this, essentially what happened is there's a semifinal event and they brought back a 2014 regional event, which I competed in, which I had an interesting experience in. But anyways, this was not my key event. It was basically like you run, you do a legless rope climb, and you do that for 10 rounds. And before the event was started, Scott said, hey, there's quite a bit of slack on the floor of the rope, and it might be a hazard on the ankle, etc., as athletes drop off from the top. Well, it turns out that they didn't cut the rope, and turns out that he hurt his knee. Now, would he have hurt his knee either way? Who knows? But it just opened up this kind of idea of, the standard with the rope and the semifinal. So that's where we're at. Let's dive in, brother.
I think that my issue was that how do you not pay attention and listen to someone with that level of experience? When Scott Panchik speaks, there's no difference between him and Rich Froning speaking. They have seen a lot. And it's not that he is trying to make an event easier. He's trying to make it so that the athletes are protected. And I think that CrossFit's done a much better job in eliminating the circus behind a lot of the workouts, right? Making it so that, like people are wearing vests in an obstacle course. It's like, you know what? The workout's hard enough just as an obstacle course. Why do you have to wear a 30-pound vest and risk people getting hurt?
Yeah.
Right. And I think that they've done a good job in trying to not let that happen. But to not listen to a Scott Panchik it says a lot. Where's the influence that someone like that has? Why aren't you paying attention to it? And that really concerned me, that there's not an infrastructure in place. Now, I just read Justin Berg's response on it, and
What did
basically
he say, by the way?
he basically said that, CrossFit has somebody in a position as an employee that is responsible for addressing these issues, and safety. But there was a communication breakdown. So, of course, now all the future ropes have all been cut for the next upcoming semifinals. But I mean, I think that this brings up a bigger picture. Like, I had a long conversation with Dave Hippensteel, who is, arguably the most dominant masters athlete out there, and he's 67 years old. And one of the problems that he talks about is, who is writing workouts for 65 plus? Are they kids?
Well, yeah.
Or are they older people?
Right.
Do they understand that a 65-year-old can't do these things?
Right.
Or they shouldn't? And that it opens up a bigger question: is are they really getting representatives like a Scott Panchik, like a Dave Hippensteel, and supporting these events or workouts so that they hit the correct demographic properly? Like, why would a 55-year-old woman do 150 GHDs in a competition? What's the point?
Yeah. And it's almost like when you're blind to that because you don't have that perspective, right? You're a 30-something-year-old event coordinator, and you can't.
Right.
Yeah, I get that. And
I mean,
Scott. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
Well, no. So, like, I was going to say, like, so I'm 58 years old, and
damn ripped, in damn good shape.
Well, so I could run a 540 mile right now, and I'm not running more than 2 days a week, which at 58, it's legit. Well, I can't. One of the things that I never knew that this would be a limitation is, I cannot, if I'm running on the open road or a trail, I cannot process the road coming at me because of my eyesight or whatever, and the speed, and I can't process if I'm going to run into a pothole. And so when I run fast, and I consider fast anything under 6 minutes, I got to go to a track because I'm not safe. And if I never even knew that existed, but it's real. And that if there's not athletes that are representative in these various demographics, that's a problem, because they have no idea. Like, should Dave Hippensteel be doing overhead squats? Is it really for that population safe? Is that the message we're sending to other 65-year-olds out there who are looking for fitness? Is that really the test? And that's the question that I have. It really brings up a lot of questions.
Well, I think bringing up Scott is really interesting because this guy's been in the game forever.
Totally.
He's been, if I'm not mistaken, he's placed top 5 like 5 times, like something, and he's been in the games, if I'm not, I think 10 times. And so for him to bring up a concern, and I think that concern about having the rope laying on the floor, it's like a pretty well-known concern. Like, it's not like unknown. Like in gyms
Molly
across the
Vollmer.
country. Yes. In gyms across the country, they know to take that rope off the floor because it's a trip hazard. It's an ankle, and then in Scott's case, it potentially impacted his knee. Right? They still don't know what happened to him, but I think this brings up, obviously, to your point, it brings up 2 things that I think are really important. Number one is, is there going to be this cohort of people where you're not just listening to your own echo chamber, right? You don't have 5 guys who are all in their this age group, this demographic, who want these things, and then baking these workouts where you start them programming for other people. And then also, and that also goes male, female, right? Like when I would program for women back in the day, I didn't have the same, I couldn't figure it out as well. So I would have, Molly, Miranda, others help me program because I couldn't tailor it well enough. And then obviously it brings up this idea of the safety in the future. And I think that it's gonna be an ongoing conversation, but hey, that's not what today's podcast is about. But it was fresh on my mind because I thought that was unfortunate.
It really is, because he was really on his game. I mean, he really was. And he's, as you said, he is one of the most dominant athletes to ever have entered the sport of CrossFit, and he's the only one that has performed at that high level that hasn't hit the podium. And this could have been his year. And to have it taken away for something like Julie Fouché. Julie Fouché in 2015 was my pick to win the CrossFit Games. She was truly dominating, and then pops her Achilles by doing rebounding box jumps, which is a very high risk movement. And there's been some migration away from that with older age groups. And so I find that positive, but you got to pay attention to a Panchik. He's not doing it to cheat. He's doing it for the health and wellness of the community.
That's right. That's right. And it wasn't a huge change that needed to happen. Hey,
No.
cut the rope.
Yep.
Put some duct tape around the bottom. Call it a day.
Boom.
Like, I mean,
Right.
boom.
Like with every gym in the world does that. And as you said, right? That's
right.
The protocol. You know?
Well, hey, on to something that's fresh on my mind. So I have been working with quite a few athletes as of recently, specifically in the jiu-jitsu space. And I find this to be really important. So taking CrossFit aside, so CrossFit's a sport of fitness. You got to be good at all these different things, all good. But when you're trying to take fitness and apply it to other sports, or when you're trying to take fitness and apply it to real life, there becomes this factor of the load on your body and diminishing returns. You could also say the same thing about CrossFit, by the way. But one of the things that I've been careful of when I'm working with our jiu-jitsu athletes is not beating them up so much that they can't go in and go train their specific sport, because they're not trying to get better at working out. They're trying to get better at their sport, but the workouts are supposed to support that, not negate that. And when I was thinking about it, I was like, man, swimming is such a powerful tool that we have not been taken into consideration, because it's low impact. You can control your breathing and so much more. So I want to talk today specifically about swim workout considerations, where to start, benefits, from a guy who, were you California state champion at one point?
No.
You were,
but I did. Yeah. I made All-American status. That was decent. And yeah, multiple times out of the water first in Kona. Yeah.
That's my man. See?
Long time ago.
Hey, it doesn't matter. You
Time
can still run a faster mile than most people. So
do you remember the time that we went to New Brighton Beach back in the day with Garrett, and we swam in the ocean, and you complained the whole time?
Dude, there was no complaining. I thought I was going to get bit by a shark. I mean,
well and a week later, there was a great white spotted right there.
Dude, so the thing about that was, for context, okay, we were trying to put ourselves in a position of, I remember we were talking about, we're like, hey, we want to make it as shitty as possible, so when we get to the CrossFit Games, it can't be as bad as this. And so one of the times, we went out there many of times, but one of the times we're just in compression shorts. If I could be mistaken, maybe I like put it on a pedestal. I think it was like 5 a.m. It was dark, just in our like underwear basically. And me, you, and Garrett go out for a swim. And you two are both very proficient swimmers, and I'm trying to keep up. And I get caught in a kelp bed, and I start freaking out. Dude, that's what happened. That's what happened.
That would happen. I don't think so. You got attacked by kelp.
That's why I didn't beat you in that mile race.
Oh boy. Okay. Yeah, that's probably true. Good memory, Jay. All right. No, I think that it's interesting that you bring up like jujitsu. So I remember the time we went down and spent time with Leo Vera at Checkmat.
Yeah, and
Marcus Buchecha. Yeah, yep. Yeah. And I've been in contact with him, and when Leo Vieira was an up and comer in jiu-jitsu when he lived in Brazil, his coach was a triathlete, and he did Ironman, and he knew me from back in that day. And Leo Vieira firmly believed in building capacity, especially for the top level jiu-jitsu where they're going 10 minutes. And one of the things that Leo mentioned several times was that prone position. And the beauty of swimming is that it's in the same prone position. And so more than 50% of your time is in that prone position. So yeah, running has value, but only when you're standing. And so it has that one benefit of it's more transferable to the movement of jiu-jitsu because of that prone posture.
Huh.
And
I didn't think about that because you're basically laying on the floor versus laying on the water, kind of, or you're on the,
kind of
you're late.
right, but it's horizontal.
Yeah, you're
And so
horizontal. Yeah.
correct. Now, the difference is that, your body weight is being supported by the water. And so a bigger athlete doesn't get punished as bad in the pool like they would on the mat because the weight is being supported. It's the same reason why in rowing, for example, they have weight classes because, the weight is supported by the object. And that's not true in the movement of running. Your body weight is supporting itself. And so when we look at aerobic capacity, what they do is they look at the milliliters of oxygen that you can consume and process per minute. And when you have the sport where you're having to support your own body weight, meaning like running or a hill climber that is, like a cyclist, like that climbs the Pyrenees or the Alps, they divide it by your kilograms of body weight. Because you have to carry that weight up the hill, or you have to carry it in the movement of running, or in cross country skiing. In rowing, they don't. And so that's why because you have more lean muscle mass, you have more muscle mass to consume and use that oxygen, you have an advantage. And so same thing holds true in swimming. But Leo Vieira loved it. And one of the things that we talked a lot about was developing the legs in the pool, because most of jujitsu is upper body work. And what he recognized was when lactic acid is created in the upper body, that lactic acid, it's really the acidity that we're worried about. And when that acidity builds up, it eventually will interfere with the muscle's ability to turn on. And if you don't clear it, you don't get rid of it, it will accumulate and eventually force you to slow. And when that happens in jujitsu, it's game over because you just pass the baton to death, meaning you're no longer in control. And so what happens is that acidity, it overloads those upper body muscle groups. And what happens is that lactic acid is all it's trying to do is find available slow twitch fibers, because your slow twitch fibers love the lactate as a fuel. Your slow twitch fibers actually use that lactate as a fuel to help it contract, help it move. And when it does use that as a fuel, it takes the acidity and removes it from the body. Well, the problem with it in jiu-jitsu is that you quickly overload the muscles in the upper body. The upper body muscle groups can handle about 50% of what the lower body can do. And so what happens quickly is that lactic acid hits the bloodstream, and it's called lactate shuttle. And now it goes throughout your entire body. And all it's trying to do is find slow twitch fibers to pull that lactate out of the bloodstream and consume it as a fuel. And when it does, it takes the acidity out with it. And that allows the upper body to keep going. What Leo Vieira liked was, what if I can make the legs more aerobically efficient? So even though they're not doing anything on the floor,
they're pulling that lactic acid. Yeah.
And that's how you get capacity. You have to think of the body as an entire structure, a system. And what are you leaving behind when you're on the mat?
So let's break this down for, swim workouts are much more complex than I think people realize, but they're not that complex, meaning there's a lot of work rest, but it's single modality, right? But you can start getting into things like fins and all kinds of stuff. But at a high level, you and I have probably done, hundreds of swim workouts together. And where should people start when they're going for their swim workout? Should they create a baseline? Should they work off that baseline? Should they and then let's talk about this idea of how come you could swim and feel just exhausted? Like I need to go eat a Thanksgiving dinner afterwards, but yet you don't ever get sore. What's up with that?
Yeah, but you're not doing the pounding that you're doing in other things. And so that's why swimming is looked upon as a active recovery sport. Well, the reality is that because of your inefficiency, Jason, you're never going to be able to do what you can do on dry land. You're not able because of your limitation. You just lack the experience to be able to put yourself into that position for a long amount of time. And so you bring up a good question. Where would you start? And the number one thing what we have to realize is the reason why you can't generate that level of fatigue is because you don't have the technique. Well, how can I give you technique? The way I do it is I give you swim fins. And swim fins are designed to make your lower body track the trail that your upper torso breaks in the water. So what you want to think about is as you're moving through the water, your shoulders, your torso is breaking the plane of water, and you need your hips and your legs to stay within that plane. And the mistake that a lot of people do is they have a bad kick. They don't have the mobility. They don't have the range of motion in the ankles. They are not able to point their toes like a ballet dancer. Well, what happens is that because their hips and their kick is weak, they end up splaying their legs, which goes outside of the plane of the torso. The other thing, when they kick, they bend at the knee. And every time the knee breaks the plane of the chest and the stomach, they slow down. And so that's why you would see a non-swimmer, when they swim, sometimes they're almost going backwards because the knee, they're bending, and the kick is always from the hip. It's from, you should feel it in the hip flexors and the high hamstring. If I give you a pair of fins, you know what's going to happen is you'll figure that out right away. And so now, with the aid of a device, you're able to actually feel what it is like to be a good swimmer. And that's important because eventually your non-fin swimming will eventually come into what it feels like to swim without fins. I mean, and you're going to go, or with fins, and you're going to go, oh, that's the feeling I was searching for. And you'll know with fins right away that you hit the sweet spot. And so fins are a great tool.
Let's pause for a second. So before we even get into 5x100 and this and this and this, we're talking about swim technique. Now, in general, do you recommend freestyle? Is that a good place to start?
For sure. Don't even play around. I mean, I know when we went to the pool the first time with Camille, I mean, you wanted to do sets of side stroke. And I was like, bro.
No side stroke here.
That's not a fifth stroke. There's only 4 strokes.
So talking about freestyle is, by the way, I had messed around with the side stroke when I would go for like super long swims. But anyways, back to freestyle.
So okay, let's talk about that really quick. That is important. So I learned a valuable lesson with Fraser. When he got into trouble once at the CrossFit Games in the water, and what happened was that he was trailing the faster swimmers drafting. Like, I taught him how to draft, and unfortunately, that swimmer was more than the 15 to 20% savings by being on someone's feet. They were probably 25% faster, and so the first thing that he did is accelerated his kick in order to stay with that swimmer. Well, the problem was that his kick was aerobically inefficient, and that sucked all of his oxygen out. And the next thing you know, he's above lactate threshold. Boom, all that lactic acid builds, the acidity interferes with the muscles. And next thing you know, he's exploding like anybody would do in the gym when they went too hard. The beauty in the gym is when you blow up, you just lean over and put your hands on your knees and you wait to recover.
Right.
I didn't realize that the problem when that occurs to a non-swimmer is there's a risk of drowning.
Yeah, for sure.
And so
for sure there's a risk of drowning.
I didn't know. And so it was like, when we talked about it afterwards, it was like he went to side stroke. And so it made me realize right away, like, there has to be a backup plan for a non-swimmer, and that is side stroke. So what I'm saying is, back in 2012 and 13, you were right. You should have that fifth stroke as a backup, just so you don't die.
Okay. So, but leaving the side stroke aside, talking about freestyle. So one of the things that I really learned from you was this idea of the hips dragging, right? And when you think about someone going across the water and you're keeping the hips up, it creates this plane, like exactly what you're talking about, and basically just glides across the water. But as soon as my hips drop, it's basically like you have a built-in anchor going across the water. Right. And, early on, I think Rich was doing that a little bit. I know I was definitely doing it. And so the fins, what they do is they help you they help you learn how to kick from the hip flexor, so almost like straight leg, right?
Yep.
And then do they also then help you with your hips dropping, or is that where the pad underneath your hips come into play?
No, so they do. They help keep your lower torso, like your trunk,
Yeah.
in alignment with the upper body and how it breaks the water. Remember, your shoulders and your chest are going to break the water, the plane of the water. Everything that follows needs to be in that plane.
Got it. And
Everything.
the
And
fins, yeah.
so fins, like one of the biggest weaknesses that non-swimmers have is they're not able to flex their foot.
Yep.
They just can't.
Right.
And so they don't have the surface area yet. They don't have the ankle mobility yet to be able to get enough surface tension to propel themselves. And the other is that they don't realize the kick doesn't occur from bending the knee. Your leg is fairly straight when you kick. The power is from the hip flexor and the glutes, the high hamstring, and you feel that activation with the fin. You feel it. If that knee is bending, guaranteed it breaks the torso, the plane of the water that the torso is breaking, and it's going to slow you down. So there's two types of fins. One is a longer fin, and it's not like the long one that the military uses, and it's not a diving fin. It's a little duck fin.
Yeah. Some of these long ones. Have you seen the ones that like free divers
Right.
use? Yeah.
Yep. And then there's a little jammer one that's maybe an inch or two longer than your toes. Now, the long fin, the purpose of it is for long, like strength. There's more surface area, so it's for slower kicking, longer sets, and it builds up your strength. But the shorter one, the reason why it came into play was it's not specific to what you would use in natural swimming without fins. So the long fin, it's so much surface area that you can't kick it at the normal rate that you would. And so they came out with this little, they call it a jammer fin, and it does help you, but you can keep the same kick frequency that you would normally do without fins. And that's why it's there. So every athlete that I work with has two sets of fins. They have the short one, and then they have the longer one.
Okay. And I have to ask, just to start off with, if you were to recommend one purchase one time, would you start with the jammer fin?
Yeah, because it does offer enough. It just depends how weak you are as a swimmer. One of the things that I tell CrossFit athletes all the time is don't get in the pool unless you're swimming a mile. It's a waste of time. Well, sometimes people need some assistance in order to get that to occur, and a longer set of fins makes that happen. In the beginning, I know a lot of people think it's like, oh, I want to do high intensity. That's the best bang for the buck. Well, you don't have the aerobic base yet. So enjoy your lack of fitness and just focus on time. Just get in the water and get some time in. Don't worry about speed yet. There's a lot of time to suffer. Get in that base mile, build up the aerobic conditioning. For jiu-jitsu, I honestly would recommend them doing 50% of their workout in fins and building up the muscular stamina of their hip flexor. I would think, you're the expert, Jay, but the hip
No,
flexor is one of the most important muscle groups in jiu-jitsu.
yeah, I'm speaking for this audience in particular, but I'm also speaking in generalities. I love this idea of the jammer fin and getting started. Yeah, in jiu-jitsu, I've been thinking a lot about the adductor and the hip flexor and how they're
Yep.
incorporated when you're holding someone. It's just been
Yep.
something that's been on my mind. And so, you said something there. It's like, hey, don't even get in the water if you're not prepared to swim a mile. And so when someone's just getting started, let's assume for the sake of argument, they really don't have much exposure to swimming other than just like recreational, right? They could swim enough not to die. But
Yeah.
when it comes to, swim strokes and things like that, what I love the idea of talking about the fins because it really correlates to the hips. But what is the next thing to focus on? Should we focus on, if you were to give a simple kind of feedback loop for someone when they're reaching and pulling through the water and then kicking, while we're on technique subject, is there some takeaway from the upper body perspective that you think that someone should start with before they really focus on time and things like that?
So we talked about the lower body and the issue. The upper body, and the number one problem that non-swimmers have is their breathing mechanics. If you think about it, the opposite is true with the upper body, meaning the legs sink, and when non-swimmers take a breath, their head goes up high. And imagine you bring your head up
because their lungs inflate.
Well, they're afraid that they're going to choke on water when they get the breath. So they believe that they have to exhale all of their air and then inhale all of the air. And their breathing mechanics are messed up in that way. You never exhale all of your air in the movement of swimming. You exhale portions of your air. So my lungs are abnormally large. I mean, that's why I was decent in endurance. And so if I push all my air out, it's 6.2 liters of exhale. Well, if I do that, I'll sink. So what I'll do is push out half of that. And now I essentially have a life vest on, and that allows me to stay buoyant. Great swimmers, they pivot around this buoyancy, which allows their feet to stay up in the water. So if you watch me float, my legs would sink. But what I do is I intentionally pivot around this buoyancy. That takes tremendous feel. But the mistake that people make, non-swimmers, is when they take the breath, they lift that head up high and the shoulders come up, which forces the hips down. Even with fins, those hips are going to fall. So you have to always remember that you want to minimize head height. Even when you see like triathletes swimming in the ocean and they're sighting, you sight by popping your head up and you just get your eyes out of the water. You're not breathing here. The way you swim and you sight is the head comes up, you look back down, and then breathe. It's a two-part process. The non-swimmer does a whole water polo stroke and keeps their head up and goes like this. And that is an incredible waste of energy.
Right, because the head doesn't come up to breathe. The head comes to the side to breathe. And for
That's
you,
correct.
what type of stroke rate do you recommend to start with? So for me, it's like left, right, breathe. Like I'm breathing like basically every other. Well, it depends on if I feel like my heart rate. It depends if I feel my heart rate really start to jack up. I'll slow that back down. But what's a good place to start? Because I actually think this is a great topic. One of the reasons why
this is the best topic.
This is the best topic.
This is by far the best. So when we talk about breathing, oh, I'm sorry. No. Oh, go tell your story, because I'm so excited about this
you,
because this is. Go,
this is it. We're running.
No, don't talk about me.
We're running and I'm breathing like shit. And I'm like, huh, 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 huh. And you're like, Jason, you're not swimming. He goes, you could breathe anytime you want to. Get your heart rate under control. And I remember when you said that to me at the time, I was like, I didn't quite, but when we got in the pool, it reminded me like, hey, when you're in the pool, you can't breathe whenever you want because your head's under the water. You can't breathe there. You have to find a rhythm. And now I've taken that into everything else I'm doing. I think about each different thing that I'm doing, like the sport of swimming. We have to find your breathing rhythm. It's because of you on the track that then correlated that with me. So let's talk about breathing.
But that is the truth. I thought you were going to tell the story about when I would jam your elbow and you threatened to fly me over the fence.
No. That was another day.
No, so we talked about breathing previously, and you're absolutely right. I think that breathing, like anything, if you look it up, it's gotten very complicated. And people are talking about nasal breathing, and you breathe in through the mouth and out through the nose, and people are losing sight of what is the most important thing in terms of breathing. And there's two core things. And when we talk about swimmers, they without a doubt have those two things nailed better than any other athlete. The worst athletes are weightlifters and gymnasts. They never establish the two core principles when it talks about breathing. Remember, the brain is responsible for the recruitment of your motor units. The brain is. So imagine the brain has no concept of when the next dose of energy is coming in. Well, how does it not know you're going to go into a 1 minute breath hold? So because of that, when it's random breathing, the brain is never going to free up the maximal amount of muscle fibers to make whatever you do easier. So if it's random, then whatever you do, just be aware it's harder than it needs to be. And I have people talk to me all the time about this. It's like, I have no idea what happened. I had the race of my life. Well, probably what happened is they locked into a reliable and predictable breathing pattern. Swimmers, without a doubt, have the best breathing rhythm because they have to. So for me, I like to breathe every stroke. Now, what's interesting is that I carry that same breathing cadence onto the bike and onto the run. So when I swim, I go and it's breath, breath. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. You know when the next dose is coming. 1, 2, 3, breath. 1, 2, 3, breath. It's coming every 4. Now, when I run, it's 4 steps. When I ride a bike, it's 2 RPMs. And that's when I'm really working hard. That's right when I'm on that edge of just going into, above lactate threshold. But that rhythm is very, very important because now the brain knows when the next dose of energy is coming. It is a reliable and predictable pattern. Swimmers, without a doubt, have demonstrated that this is the way to go for every sport.
Have you seen working with CrossFit athletes in the pool has taught them this particular skill? I imagine it has to across the board.
Oh,
I know it
yeah.
did for me, but
Yep.
yeah.
So that's why you see athletes, though, that bilateral breathe. They actually prefer breathing on a 6 count because, right, they're not breathing like I do. They hold for 1 more and they breathe on the left side. Now, I never learned when I was a kid that way, and so it never turned out to be as efficient. But you see someone bilaterally breathe, they're going to breathe when they run on a 6 count naturally.
Huh. And so, we talked about the feet being like a guide towards the hips, and then the hips being a key component. And then obviously you talk about your upper body, and we're talking about breathing cadence and kind of breathing out to the side, which I think is key. One of the things that I really learned early with swimming was this idea of like lat stamina and pulling my arm
Mhm.
through the water. So when you think about freestyle, what is the role of your hands and what should you be thinking about?
So a lot of people think that you're squeezing your fingers together and you're not. So what you're really doing is you're developing what they call this feel of the water. And this feel, and it takes practice. It takes years of experience. What you want to do is you want to have the hands actually relaxed. And what you're trying to do is create the optimal distance between your fingers to maintain surface tension with the water. So what I'm doing is I'm increasing the surface area of my hand by keeping, not like where they're pushed together, I'm actually opening them up and creating almost like a web-like hand. And that's what they talk about in terms of feeling the water. And so what you want to do is you want to actually get a small hand paddle, increase the surface of your hand, and get a feel of what it's like to really grab that water. And that is a very difficult thing for new swimmers because they don't know what I'm talking about. Feel.
Right,
You put a
right,
pair of
right.
hand paddles on, and right away, you know if you've twisted your hand to one side, the other, and you've lost the tension of the water. It is the ability to maintain the tension of the water from the catch all the way down past your hip. And that's important. Non-swimmers, they don't have a good feel. They're not aware of that surface tension from that catch all the way through the stroke. And that's the most important thing. Are you feeling the water?
So would you recommend then, as a beginner athlete getting into the pool, obviously the fins are a great recommendation. Would you also recommend then something for your hands to feel that pull of the water from inserting at the top to pulling down to the hip? Because as you said, and I hadn't thought about this before, if you rotate your hand early or rotate it in a weird way, you won't feel the water the same way. But
That's right. But that's
yeah,
where a paddle comes in. A paddle is
right.
going to to highlight that, and it'll emphasize like something's wrong. With your hand, when it's off, you don't notice it. And you don't notice that loss of grip in the water. Like good swimmers, they prefer swimming in salt water because of a better feel. It feels thicker.
Huh. And so
Imagine swimming in like thick water.
yeah. Well, I like the salt water because I feel like I'm more buoyant, but maybe
It's true.
yeah.
No, it's true.
And so when you're thinking about these components, would you start with both the fin and the hand at the same time, or would you pick one or the other to start with?
So you want to think of kicking as a drill. So there's all kinds of drills that you can do. You can do like a catch-up drill where you have one hand out in front and you're just swimming and alternating. You could take where you have your thumb scrape the lower part of your thigh before it exits the water. You could do a fingertip grab across, the top of the water to teach your high elbow coming around. So there's lots of those drills, so the kick is a drill. But if we look at learning how to feel the water, we want to do it in isolation. So like, in lifting, if you take an Olympic lift, there's so many things that are going on at the same time that if you could overload an athlete, there's too much information.
Right.
So let's isolate it. And if we're focusing on upper body, let's focus on one aspect of upper body. Let's eliminate the kick. So they have a device which is called a pool boy, and it's a foam piece device that slides up between your legs. And what you do is you pinch it with your legs, and the buoyancy allows you to keep your hips and your legs up following the plane of the torso. So you could have a small little kick in there. It's not restrictive like you have an inner tube tied around your ankles, but it allows you to isolate upper body. Now, since the lower body is functioning properly, you could focus on your mechanics, and that could be a multitude of things. You could isolate, like I said, a certain drill, or you can isolate that feel, or you could isolate your breath.
Yeah.
So that's why you want to like equipment is important. And there is a snorkel device that is also out there that will come out and straight over your forehead. Now, a lot of people are like, boy, why would I ever? Well,
right.
The reason why is because you don't have to worry about your breathing getting and interfering and having your mechanics from that.
You're taking out one of those factors, right? It's almost like doing Olympic lifting, but doing it from the hang, or doing
exactly, or blocks or
blocks or whatever. Yeah.
Yep. That's right. Huh. Because it's too complicated.
Yeah.
It's too complicated. And that's why swimming is a sport that should be taught when you're young, because kids don't overthink it. They just do it. Adults are like, I don't understand what's happening with, exactly tell me when my hand is coming in the water. Should it be at midline? Should it be my thumb crossing over? And does it follow that whole way down? It's like they're overthinking it. Kids just get in there and go. And so
that's why you get there and go. I mean, so you get some equipment, you work on these drills, you fundamentally, right, you need exposure. And so if we're trying to get athletes exposure, where do you start? I mean, is it just, hey, let's just say you're in a 25-meter pool, right? Let's just say it's down and back, rest, recover, 1-to-1, hit that for 10 rounds. I mean, is that a good place to start? I mean, where would you start?
Yeah. So again, I would start out if I was new to swimming or I was out of shape in swimming. I would really focus on my easier intensities. What I would do is build up my aerobic foundation, my base. Remember, your aerobic energy is using your oxygen as fuel. That oxygen is converting those carbohydrates or fat into fuel to contract your muscles. And one of the weaknesses that people have is that their muscles in the movement of swimming, because they haven't done it, is they're not aerobically capable. ignoring just the stamina. Their inability to move and utilize oxygen is inefficient. And if you think about most people, the legs are without a doubt the largest muscle group in the body. So the reason why I support and I promote, swimming with fins, and especially kicking, getting a kickboard and using short fins and long fins, is because you build up the aerobic capacity of the largest muscle group in the body. And anybody can grab a kickboard and a pair of fins and look beautiful in their kick. Anybody. So what you need to do is find within your swim workout, as inexperienced as you are, get some fins and a kickboard and focus on the largest muscle group in the body. If you can do that and develop the aerobic capacity of the legs, the arms, whatever you're doing downstream with the arms is going to be a whole heck of a lot easier. And that's where people should really start. They should really recognize, if we're looking at muscle groups, where should I focus on? And how can I work good mechanics while I'm building up my base? And you know what? The kick is the obvious choice. So I like the idea. I write mostly kick workouts for people, especially when they're new. We're going to swim twice a week. One's going to be a standard swim workout, and the other is going to be mostly kicking, because we need to build up the aerobic capacity of the kick, the legs.
Yeah. Yes, dude, this is exciting for me because I know some people listening are probably like, oh yeah, like me, I'm like a little kid right now, because I've been there before where I've been on a kickboard. I've tried to use my legs the right way, and you just feel your hip flexors, your quads, you just light up. And this is a great place to start, because you're right. You're not going to look foolish. You're not going to look stupid. You're not going to have a risk of basically drowning because you have a kickboard. You can really do it and not feel, that like a fish out of water, and then transition into your next step. And
exactly. That's when you would transition.
So you would do that for a little bit and then start working on other types of the breathing rhythm. I just think has so much value to that as well. Is there a way to work the breathing rhythm without actually swimming, or is that kind of not relatable?
Yeah. So the breathing in swimming is very unique. There's not another sport that does it. And it's because when you are exhaling, it is a long exhale. I mean, you are exhaling before you're a long one. I mean, you're essentially exhaling right after your head goes straight in the water again, but you're pursing your lips together and you're slowly pushing out air until you turn your head to the side. The forehead creates a nice pocket that you can safely take a portion of a full lung breath. Inhale. And so breathing is one of those in swimming that it takes a lot of practice. And for adults, it's highly frustrating. That's why using one of those snorkels it's a good idea, so that you can focus on and isolate upper body mechanics. But if we talk about next steps, and this is important, you need to develop gears when you swim. You can't just have swimming speed. Like, remember when you started running with me, you just had one speed, fast. You just had fast, right? I mean, that was it. Hey, you couldn't run slow. Right. Yeah. Right. You just couldn't run slow. And so you have to have gears, because every speed recruits different muscle fibers. And so what you want to do is you want to develop the slowest of the slow twitch fibers by going slow and building their stamina, because that's where your volume, your capacity is going to come from, is those slow twitch fibers. But you also want to build up those fast twitch fibers where that pure speed comes from, and everything in between. So think of it as like your 10-second running sprint speed all the way to walking speed, that whole spectrum. Now, there is something called critical swim speed. It's a formula that takes into account two different distances in the movement of swimming. For me, I like to compare 50 meters and 400 meters. So what they're doing is they're looking at your finishing time in 50 meters or yards, whatever unit of measure you are using, it's got to be the same. and they look at the speed in that 50-meter distance, and they compare that meters per second against what you do for 400 meters.
Okay.
And you know that you can't maintain your 50-meter speed for 400 meters. Your speed slows.
Right.
And that's what's called a coefficient of slowing, or a fatigue factor. That slope, that rate of fatigue from an anaerobic time domain to an aerobic time domain, or a fast twitch to a slow twitch, tells you a lot about the athlete, their strengths and weaknesses. But critical swim speed, this formula, what it will do is it will calculate your rate of fatigue as well as your sustainable pace if you've got the stamina. It will also, and I'll send this to you, Jay, and you could share it with your listeners, but what they do is they plug that in, and it will calculate all their 5 paces.
So when you talk about 5 paces, so correct me if I'm wrong, we had a 50-meter yard. I would call that a high intensity effort. I mean, that's down and back. You're grinding.
It's a sprint. It's a sprint.
Flip turn, just do your thing, right?
It's 100% effort. Yep.
And then 400, it's still pretty. I mean, that's a lot longer actually. That's down back a bunch of times. But
for a non-swimmer, that could take them 9-10 minutes.
Okay. And so we'll put this in the podcast show notes with the critical swim speed is what I wrote down. Now,
I'll send it to you.
That provides you 5 different kind of like concepts for what distances then does it provide?
Speeds. So there's speeds. So think of it as 5 speeds. So you would have easy speed, moderate speed. You would have like a lactate threshold speed. You would have a race pace, like a VO2 max speed, and then you'd have sprint speed. So what this does is it breaks it up into these different gears, and those are the core gears. And so when you're designing workouts, you can use a specific target time to gauge your level of intensity. And that's important because when you design a workout, there's always these 3 core qualities in swimming. We're targeting the distance. And if I add more distance into your swim diet, then the body's going to adapt to be able to do more volume. The same thing holds true if I add more sprint speed, you're going to get faster. Well, same thing holds true in recovery. If I gradually reduce your recovery between intervals, then your body's going to learn how to recover faster. So we manipulate those. We want to manipulate those qualities, though, around the 3 main speeds so that our entire muscle fiber spectrum gets developed.
And so, and by the way, if people want that from you, they can just go to aerobiccapacity.com if they want to be able to look at those workouts.
They could actually go, I give away. So the initial workouts that I program for T, I give away for free. They're in, if they go to my Instagram, they can just go to the link and they're free. They could just download them.
For that. Okay. And so I have to ask, you have an expertise in this run, bike, swim, aerobic capacity, which is now carried over in a bunch of different movements that you've explored. You have seminars, you work with people all over the world. From a purely aerobic capacity perspective, what do you think has more bang for the buck? Swim, bike, or run? I'm just out of curiosity. Assuming someone's developed a moderate level of proficiency.
Without question, it's running. So here's what's interesting to me.
Without question, running. Okay.
Without question, because you need to be able to support your body weight. So Jay, so here's the deal. I don't even know if we've ever talked about this, but you are an anomaly. You are truly one of the rarest individuals that I've had the opportunity ever to work with. And it's crazy.
My good looks or what?
Bro, come on. I'm serious. So I mean by anomaly is this. You could do a 2,000 meter row and you could do it in 6 minutes and 10 seconds because you're big. And that's not a surprise, right? Like, you're big. You've got a lot of lean muscle mass. And because of that muscle mass, you've got more mitochondria to consume and use that oxygen and convert it into fuel. That's why you're faster on a rower than me. But why is it that you can get down to a 520 mile and weigh what you weigh? It's because you can manage your size. Bigger people pay the price when they have to support their body weight. You didn't. You're an anomaly in that you can manage your size. You're big, yet you can support it. And that is rare. Froning, Fraser, and you. That's it. I've never come across other people that are like that. And we saw it when you and I would do those trail runs. When we would run uphill, you would destroy me because my efficiency went out the window, and that's where your power kicked in. Your size didn't hurt you, not only supporting your weight on flat ground, but it didn't hurt you in going up, which is a double-edged sword.
And so you say that running is like the component, but it's because you're supporting your weight. But if you were worried about overtraining, if you were worried about overloading the system, would you still prefer, like an athlete, to run over run over swim? Or is that compounding going to impact? Or do you say, hey, if you run efficiently and you're not running, miles and miles and miles, you'll actually get more bang for the buck being on the track for a 2 to 3 mile session than you would swimming?
It's the most, what we're talking about is the most efficient use of your time.
Yes.
So,
exactly.
so what's interesting is the sport with the least percentage fatigue, meaning, so what I mean by this is your rate of fatigue as you move into longer and longer time domains. So when you go from 1 minute to 3 minutes to 5 minutes to 10 minutes to an hour, your rate of fatigue between those three sports, swimming, cycling, and running. Swimming, the rate of fatigue is the least percentage. So meaning you could hold on to a higher percentage of your top end speed as you move into longer distances. Cycling is next. Rowing is next after that. Running is double the rate of fatigue of rowing. Double. Meaning your speed slows in the movement of running at twice the rate that it does in rowing, and more than 2x and almost 3x in the movement of swimming. So more than 2x in cycling and almost 3x in the movement of swimming. That's what's compelling. Meaning that's how hard it is to support body weight for anybody. So
You really got me thinking here, because I was really trying to create this idea of developing aerobic capacity through the pool as a catalyst to kind of deload the body. But if I'm thinking about time bang for your buck and access to a pool, I mean, running does come with its benefits, right? I mean, you could do it anywhere. And as long as you could get on a track and you can start creating, and I mean, you and I have talked about this, endlessly, which we should do another session on, just how to prepare for your runs, right? Because that's a whole nother beast.
but think about you. Like, when you worked on your running, and it wasn't that we ran fast. We didn't run fast. We were developing your entire spectrum of fibers, the slowest of the slow walking to your 10-second sprint. But we spent a lot of time going slow. And how did that translate to all the other things that you were doing in the gym while standing? I'm talking weightlifting, back squats, front squats, snatches, right? Clean and jerks. Anything that you did standing, those standing muscles are now, they have more capacity, they have more stamina, and they're not passive anymore. They're active. And when something is heavy, you recruit all your muscle fibers, your fastest of the fast to the slowest of the slow. Well, what if you don't train your slow? Then they're not available.
That's right. And so if you want to get back on the track, and I mean, look, I could talk to you for another 3 hours, but I had this question.
Yes.
I've been, as of recently, been more interested in like barefoot type stuff, like not crazy, but I'm intrigued. And, I spend a decent amount of time on the jiu-jitsu mat, so I'm barefoot a lot.
Yeah.
But right now I've been trying different shoes out, the Go Ruck shoe, this, you name it. What shoe are you kind of rocking right now as far as like an entry level to kind of have like a minimal approach to your kind of reinforcing this midfoot strike? Where would you start? You say, hey, fuck all that, right? Let's just get a big cushion because you probably run poorly anyways. Make sure you have some protection. What do you think? Chris Hinshaw is currently taking off his headset, and I think he's going to get a shoe. This episode brought to you by
Oh, no.
what shoe is that, man?
This is the Adidas Adi Zero. And I'm going to show you something there. So you could see where I land. Can you see
Yeah.
my midfoot strike right there?
Oh, wow. So for those of you who are listening to this, Chris is holding up a Adidas shoe that has like a pink bottom, but in one particular area. Is that worn off, that white?
Oh, yeah. Here's the other one. Yeah.
Wow, that's pretty cool. Okay.
So if you look at this shoe, what's interesting is on the bottom, the wear character. We're supposed to be talking about swimming, but so this is a midfoot strike, right here.
Right.
This actually, they talk about a toe strike, but this wear characteristic where I land is on right next to my baby toe. So that's how they came up with toe strike, is that it hits the baby toe. So when I relax my ankle as it comes through the swing phase of my stride, I land right here. Now, what's rad about this shoe, and you and I have seen and heard a lot of hype from people. Oh, it's the greatest thing since, man, this is game changer. And it's just gimmicks. So this shoe, I saw that a woman ran a 1:03 half marathon and set a world record in it in Prague. And so I was like, man, I got to check this thing out. Well, Heidi takes care of it. And she, dude, I'm just going to tell you, because I'll send you even the paperwork that I did, because I did a 5K in my old shoe and then rested 5 minutes and did a 5K in this shoe. And this shoe was over 30 seconds faster at the same heart rate in the second 5K. Anyway, what's cool is you can see the black lines. Can you see those black lines?
You told me about this before, like months, if not a year ago, talking about like the rods that are in there.
And I have never had a shoe that makes me want to run fast. I mean, it literally, I did a 5-mile run when I tested the first time, and I said to myself, man, I feel like running an 800 meters fast. And that's what I did, is I ran an 800 meter fast, and I hadn't run an 800 meter fast. And that's when I realized, like, wow, COVID was pretty rad. Like, I got fast at running.
Yeah. So that's the Adidas Zero is what it's called?
Adi Zero. Yep.
Adi Zero. Dude, so I
And
love how fired up you're getting. Dude, I love how fired up you're getting. I love the fact you're able to pull it up. Like, the way you feel about that shoe is the way that I feel recently about the cold plunge that I got. Like, I want to go scream from the hilltops about the impact it's had on my life and other people's life, like my daughter's life. But
I was just listening to Joe Rogan talk about that, and and his protocol of saunas and cold plunge and timelines, and awesome. But that's why
deep.
I'm sorry, but that's why
you and I can keep going. Yeah, go ahead.
But that's why I think that's what we should be doing. Like, don't hype up something that doesn't. Come on. That's why I don't have a lot of sponsorship things out there. I don't. I only want things that I will use because it provides me value.
Right.
Otherwise, I'm not going to use it. I won't touch the thing. And this shoe, I mean, I spoke to Adidas this morning even, and I'm like, look, I'll buy the product. So if we can't get something going, I'm still going to buy it, just so you know. It's that good.
Right.
It's that good. It's a game changer. It was like when I did triathlons, and there's a product that a component manufacturer in Italy, Campagnolo, and back in the 80s was when they made the first disc wheels. So no spokes. What they did is they eliminated them, and they created 2 monolithic Kevlar spokes that covered, the wheel from the hub to the rim. Well, wind tunnel test said that in a 40-kilometer time trial, 25 miles, which was a standard Olympic distance back then, and still is, it was a minute of savings.
Wow.
These discs were $2,500. And I mean, we're talking about 1989, $2,500.
With current inflation rates, that's $100,000.
At least, yes. So because of my sponsorship with them, I had it for free.
Yeah.
It gave me an unfair advantage. I was able to go a minute faster, or I could go the same speed and now start my run completely rested. that's a game changer. And so that's where I feel like athletes, like it's hard to tell if something is good or not. Like, what makes it great? Well, I tested it. Yeah. I mean, I'll send you that too, so you could read about it, but it's legit. And I haven't come across products that often that are not just gimmicks.
Dude. Well, look, we're creeping over an
Anyway,
hour. We got to sit down and talk again. This time about run. Next time we got to talk running. Oh, and we got to still follow up with Kelly and you on
dude,
kids and fitness. That episode was great.
that was so
Dude, I
great.
always love chatting with you, and I love getting insight. The reason why I'm on the phone with you right now is because I really want to know, hey, what do you think about swimming? I want to incorporate this for athletes that I know, but now I'm having a little bit of a, but if I am going to go with the swimming model, we have huge considerations. But is the best bang for the buck going there, or should it be, because they're already coming into our gyms doing our NCFIT workouts, but I'm trying to then get in some additional aerobic capacity. So I think the run could be a good option. So
Keep in mind the movement patterns are different. And so if I was going to contrast something, running is opposite to swimming, vertical versus horizontal. And there is a good complementary, value there. So, I mean, I grew up swimming, and I'm grateful for it. I feel sorry for adults that learn now, and it's such a frustrating struggle.
for sure.
And that's the surefire way to get people to quit if it's never enjoyable. So that's why I bring up, get some equipment if you're going to do it, and at least find a place where you can actually feel good about yourself while doing it, because you're going to be littered with frustration in the beginning. It's something that's hard for an adult to learn.
That's good advice.
That's why, yeah.
Thank you. And
No,
Chris, so I know you always have exciting stuff going on at Aerobic Capacity. You guys have seminars all over the country, all over the world. For people who want to go to a seminar, go hear from you in person. I mean, it's evident that when we're talking, you have a wealth of knowledge that's untapped. I mean, that not untapped, I shouldn't say it, but you have a wealth of knowledge, and it continues to grow even further every seminar you do. Where should people go to go find your seminars?
if they go to Aerobic Capacity, aerobiccapacity.com, they can go to the event page there. All the seminars are now listed, always have been. And I really, it's interesting. I just did a seminar up in Boston over the weekend, and I was reflecting on afterwards, the content in the course. It's it's incredible. I genuinely, and I really do consider it's perfect. And what's beautiful about the content is that it's empowering for the person to come in and listen. What I mean by that is, like, it's not overwhelming from a technical standpoint. We don't run, and we talk about these things that you didn't think about in the same way that I did. You knew it, but you just didn't put the pieces together the same way. And so when people leave, they leave with this like invigoration, like they're fired up because they ran out of ideas. They weren't sure in direction. And now what we did is we just put the pieces together, and it's like the light bulb turned on. It's like, I knew all of it. And now it's
100%.
clear. And that's what's beautiful, is like, because people have put in a lot of work. I mean, think about how many seminars that you've been to and done. And people are looking for growth and education, but it does get confusing. And this thing, what it does is it puts it together: energy systems, muscle fibers, and how to program and assess. And
Yep.
I tell your story all the time, and people love it. You're a good old mile for time.
Oh, dude, the clock's still going, or the one that? Oh,
No, I
no,
told
not
that one too. I
Yeah.
told that one. I could do a book on you.
Oh man,
I have your impersonation down too, by the way. It's really good.
dude, we got to do it in person. So, oh man. Well, Chris, until next time, brother. Always appreciate chatting with you. Thank you so
Always.
much for sharing your knowledge, and
Thank you.
we'll
Man.
make sure we add in the podcast show notes the links and the critical swim speed. So, thank you so much.
Yep. Thanks.